Welcome everyone to those of you that were not able to attend on Friday, the CLV lecture. This is the reasonable facsimile thereof. CLV is a really interesting concept. It stands for customer lifetime value, and it's a good concept to know. It's a mechanism by which you can look at customers, what's going on in terms of trying to define what their worth is to a firm over the lifetime that you have a relationship with this customer. And it's a function of a couple of things. One is the contribution margin from a customer. In other words, what profit you get from that customer. And in order to determine what the customer lifetime value, you have to take that margin or profit that comes from a customer, and you have to subtract from that the cost of acquiring that customer, which tends to be anywhere at a minimum from 3 to 5 times what it costs to retain a customer, and there's costs there. And you have to discount all of that based on the discount rate or the net present value of money. So we'll come back to this particular page here at the later on in the lecture, but it's a function of looking at these elements and determining what those are. So a little lesson for those of you that may not be familiar with it on net present value or the discount cash flow rate of money. It's basically money that you have today is worth more to you than money that you have down the road. So what you have to figure out is something called the net present value of that money. And money has a time value associated with it, right? So a dollar that you get today is worth more than a dollar next year, and that's a function of many things. One in particular is it's the amount of investment and earned interest that you can have, or rate of return over that time. So if you have a dollar today, and you, all things being equal, and you properly manage your money, that dollar is worth more to you, or should be worth more in 3 years. So let's say if you have a 10% rate of return per year, then in 3 years, with any luck, it should be $1.30 or something similar to that. You know, there's compounding and all that, but let's just to make it simple. So if you then have that dollar and it's worth more down the road, that means a dollar in 3 years would be worth less, essentially, because you could have been doing more with that dollar since you had it. So there's something called the discount rate that represents what the interest rate is at the moment. Interest rates are low, so the discount factor is a bit smaller than it has been even in recent past. So what you have to do is you have to figure out what that rate is, and the net present value of $100 today, right, means that if you were to look out X amount of years, let's say 3 years in the case of this scenario, right? You get $75.13 today, and that's worth the same amount as getting $100 in 3 years, or $7.51 versus $10 and so on, or 75 cents versus a dollar today, right? And again, you can, if you have that dollar today, you can earn hopefully a rate of return on that dollar over that period of time. So that means a dollar 3 years out would be worth more today, right? $1.30-ish or so. So that's the whole concept of net present value money. You've got to factor that into the relationship you have in determining and valuing what a customer today is worth, right? So a customer today should be worth more than a customer 3 years down the road, right? Same kind of element. So what do you need to calculate it? Well, you need to know what the contribution margin is. You need to have an idea, forecasting, predicting what the contribution margin will be in the future. How likely, too, is you have to determine how likely that customer is to stay with you and for how long. So what's the typical rate at which customers, or the retain rate, right? So you have to figure out what it costs to serve the customer. Once you've acquired it, what does it cost to keep them as a customer? So that's kind of important to know what that is. And you also have to kind of look at, you know, your organization's discount rate. That varies depending on, you know, what's going on. Sometimes it's in line with the discount rate, sometimes it isn't, depending on your organization. So here's the formula, and basically what you're looking at here is, let's look at the factors or the terms that are in there. You have the time period, right? So what period of time are you looking over? You have the expected lifetime of the customer, right? So how long do you plan on retaining that particular customer? And that's a function of 1 over 1 minus the retention rate. So think about it, right? If you have a retention rate of, let's say, 4 years, right? So that means that that number, right, in the numerator, right? So that's going to be, 1 over 1 minus that number. The longer that number goes out, right, the bigger the expected lifetime is, right? So it means you get to sum that over a longer period of time. Contribution margin is what the customer generates in terms of profit for the organization over that period of time. A cost to retain, right, is an ongoing thing. So as long as you have that customer, there is a yearly cost to retain. And then you can see that the cost to acquire is a one-time number, right? That's not put in the summation, which makes sense because essentially what you're doing is you're spending that one time to acquire it. And remember, the cost to acquire a customer can be 3 to 5 times what it costs for the annual cost to retain a customer. So that's an important thing to know and be aware of. And then the discount rate, right? So let's go back and just take a quick look at that sort of verbal description. Okay, it's the contribution margin from the customer less the cost of acquiring and retaining the customer discounted to the present or net present value. And that's exactly what that formula does, right? So you've got, here's the contribution margin less the cost to retain and divided by the retention rate, and you sum that over the time, right? You sum that over the, actually, sorry, this is the discount rate. Let me start back again. Here's the margin, right, for that year, minus the cost to retain for that year, divided by the discount rate, okay? Then you sum that over the time period that you are a customer, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then you subtract the cost to acquire, and that's the total customer lifetime value. So here's some examples of 10-year customer lifetime value for an average customer for these product companies. So, think about it here, right? You've got a BMW over 10 years will generate a customer lifetime value of $143,000. Seems crazy, right? But over that average period of time, you'll have a minimum of 2 car purchases by a BMW customer. And then you have the service and normal average costs of being a BMW customer, and that comes from a number of things. You're going to have repairs, you're going to have annual services, regular oil changes, and of course with these particular vehicles, nothing's inexpensive. Typically people that get BMWs have service plans, and they're involved in, and sometimes the service plans are pretty significant. You might talk, $5,000-$10,000 a year times how many years. So just right then or there, you can see it ends up being a big chunk of what that cost is. This number here, actually, to me, being a Gillette customer and using the razor seems low. That would mean on average you spend $26 a year on blades. I think I spend more than that, sadly. You've got insurance, right? So here it may be this. I think the Hartford has not only home insurance, they have life insurance, property, casualty, theft, those types of things. So you've got a number of, and over a period of time, right, over 10 years, you think about, annual insurance, life insurance payments, annual property insurance, car, all of that. That adds up a lot. So you can see even things like soda, right, Coca-Cola, and that just doesn't necessarily maybe include soda. So if you have a loyal Coca-Cola customer, you end up seeing a lot of dedication and money that can be made. So if someone is a loyal customer and you have them for a long time and you manage your business right, they can generate a ton of profitability for you. So here's an example of CLV looking at this company, a company called Aircom. So here, let's kind of take, again, going back to the formula, right? And let's look at if we can kind of break this down. So new customers generate an average revenue of $150 and an average margin of $50 for the first year. So that means, right? So they generate $150 in revenue. Okay. Actually, is it revenue or margin? Average revenue. Okay. Margin of 50. So for that first year, right, they're generating $50 in margin, right? Contribution margin. And existing customers generate an average of $400 per year, an average $250. So going out every successive year, they make $250 in terms of margin. Cost to acquire is $250. So if you look at the formula, AC is $250, right? Average marketing costs are $50, so that means RC is $50. And the customer retention rate is 75, which means, right, 1 minus 75. That means they lose 25% of their customers every year. They retain 75. So right there, right, it says 1 minus 75 ends up being 0.25. 1 divided by 0.25 is 4, right? So the expected lifetime of that customer for Aircom is 4 years. All right, there you go. I just said that verbally, and here's a slide that supports it. So when you look at costs, right, acquisition costs here, it costs, what did it say? $250 to acquire. So there's $250 right here. And you spend $250 before you started actually getting any revenue from anyone. In your first year, it's $50 worth of revenue. Is that right? Yep. After that, every successive year is $250. So it's $50, $250, $250, $250. So here you got 50 plus 250. Well, you got 3 times 250. That's 750 plus 50 is 800. Cost you 250. So that means contribution margin 650, right? In terms of how that works, right? So, and then of course there's retention costs. So you make 250 in revenue, but it costs you $50 every year, and then your first year, does it cost you 50 as well? So it's 50 every year. So here, right, you make 50, but you spend 50. You still get 250 in it. Right? You got 250 in it here. You make 50, but you spend 50, so those cancel out. You're still in the whole 250. Here you make 250, but you spend 50, so you're 200. You're still 50 in the hole, right? Yeah, that makes sense, because here, yeah, you're still, it cost you 250 here, and you're up 200 here, so you're still behind by 50. And here, then you actually in year 3 you start making money, right? Because you net 200, you were 50 in the hole, so now you make 150 here. So at some point in time here, you actually start to break even or start covering your costs. So time to T0 is when the customer's acquired. Acquisitions 250, revenues 150, because you have margin minus the $50 to retain, right? And then the subsequent years, you're $400 in revenue, $250 a year in margin, minus 50, so that's 200, and then you have a discount rate. So it's pretty simple when you plug it into the formula, right? We're just kind of hand cranking it here. You've got, as I mentioned, 50 in revenue, 50 in expense. Then you got 250 in revenue, 50 in expense, 250, 50, 250, 50, and then you have the 250, which is the cost to acquire. That's AC. Right? So we're just pumping these numbers in here, and what you eventually get is the total customer lifetime value is $179 over that 4-year period. Not bad. You can also do it in spreadsheet form if that works for you. It's no different, right? And you can see here, right, you're losing money for the first year and the second year, and in year 3 you start to break into making money, and then year 4 obviously you've made some money. So when you do this analysis, you find break-even is actually 31.6 months. Kind of an important thing. So that's customer lifetime value in a nutshell. We'll definitely review it on Wednesday when we go over the Rosewood Hotel case in particular. If you have any questions on doing and filling out the spreadsheet, feel free to give me a call. Just a couple of quick comments and observations here on the Epsilon case, and I'll post these slides. And they're available on Blackboard for you to look at. When you look through this and you look at this marketing analytics data, there's actually a ton of stuff that ties back to customer lifetime value. A customer response system, and figuring out how you determine what generation, what customer, keeping customers more reliable in the sense that they're going to be spending more money with you, and how to figure out how to go after them. And this whole thing about Epsilon dealing with digital analytics is really trying to drive that. So it's understanding what makes customer ticks and trying to get more money out of them. Here's an example of where they were trying to test two different kinds of emails to determine which ones actually led to orders, right? And so they had a version A and a version B. Here they found that campaign A was slightly better, and that slight, can make a huge amount of difference. This company is all about trying to maximize and leverage customer lifetime value through using analytics in email, direct email, to drive behavior and then learn some things from it as well. So when you read through this presentation, you'll see that that's really, in essence, what this presentation is about, is customer lifetime value, to be honest. So that's our quick overview on the lecture from last Friday. Hope you all are having a good weekend, and we'll see you on Wednesday. You need anything else before then, please feel free to reach out to me either via phone or email. Thanks.